We'll say a prayer, make it official. Face out. And Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. And blessed the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Saint Vincent Ferrer, Saint Jude, Our Lady of Victory, Lady of Sorrows, Lady of Apparitions, Saint Ignatius, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. So we got the arrival of Reverend Mr. Mario. Okay. So, and in theory, become a padre in the near future. Okay. Now, so in any case, just 2012, see this child, and back on again. Oops. So kind of continuing the 2012, of course, we had a major change in the Society of St. Pius X and built up. And at that time, I was meeting with multiple priests. Principally, you got that turned back on, right? Okay. Principally, Bishop Williamson and, and so but basically that, okay. So we continue the work of the society. That there's been some slow changes in the operation of the Society of St. Pius X. And that the changes involve the, remember that we're speaking about the resistance to Vatican II involving the war consists of soldiers, right? And look at this guy. I think this guy did me. That the war consists of soldiers, and that where my holy stick go here? There it is. And that it's not just a matter of ideas. That we have to, or the Catholic Church is incarnational by nature. There must be real people to continue the faith. And that these real people to continue the faith, they are going to be human beings with human flaws. Archbishop Took, we saw the little video on just a quick video on the validity of his consecrations. There are many bishops coming from Archbishop Took and priests, but this provided maybe, I'm going to guess, 50, 100,000 people going to masses throughout the world. Archbishop Took priests. And then maybe about the same number, a little bit more, going to masses from Archbishop Lefebvre priests. And together there are about maybe 3,000 priests coming from the two of them. And then from Archbishop Took, many bishops, Archbishop Lefebvre, 7 bishops. And that here, this continuation of the faith does require a bishop. Requires a bishop to pass on the priesthood. And it's interesting that of all the bishops since Vatican II, these two are the ones that are assaulted. And the reason is quite simple. Nobody cares about Cardinal Bernardine or Cardinal Mahoney or even like Bishop Strickland or a Bishop Schneider or our Bishop Vigano. Because there are bishops, these modern bishops, who are either saying nice things or doing mean things and saying mean things. But they're not doing anything to actually practically stop the kingdom of Satan. Whereas these bishops took physical steps Archbishop Took and Archbishop Lefebvre took physical steps, recognizing the Catholic Church as an incarnational church. It's a church in which God and his truth must enter into flesh, and God and his truth must be carried by human flesh. And as Bishop Sheen used to say, the mystery of the Catholic priesthood is the mystery of Simon Peter. That every priest has in him a Simon nature and a Peter nature. And Simon is the fact that he is the son of a fisherman, the fact that he is a human being with human weaknesses and makes often poor choices. And his Peter nature is given to him by God. When God said to him, Christ said to him, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." That every priest has a Simon in him and a Peter in him. And that the Simon nature does not destroy the Peter power. That's the way the Bishop Sheen says it. And that the Simon nature is necessary that there be a Peter power. And the power of St. Peter is not just, of course, in the case with St. Peter, it's the power of the papacy, of course, but it's also the fullness of the priesthood. The Peter power refers to the ability to baptize, the ability to hear confessions, the ability to confirm, and the ability to teach the faith, and the ability to celebrate the holy sacrifice of the Mass, absolve from sins, and to make other soldiers of Christ who are lower soldiers in confirmation and captains and generals in priesthood and episcopacy. And that's the hierarchy and physical nature of the church. There have been many bad popes, many bad bishops, and many bad priests in the last 2,000 years. And yet the holiness of St. Peter's power and the holiness of Christ's priesthood has continued from generation to generation and has not been broken. But real men carry this. No one pays attention to the wicked ones because they're just wicked doing what wicked men do. But whenever someone does something good, they're immediately criticized, assaulted, and spit on. And that's the case of Archbishop Took and Archbishop Lefebvre. Archbishop Took did not create an organization structure. He was an old archbishop. He was about 10 years older than Archbishop Lefebvre. So he was born in 1880, I think, something like that, 1880 something. And then 1890, Archbishop Lefebvre was born in 1905. Archbishop Took was like 1897 or 1895, something like that, almost 10 years between them. So that Archbishop Lefebvre was ordained a bishop, consecrated bishop in 1948. Archbishop was consecrated bishop in 1937. So that's almost, everything is almost 10 years in their priesthood, their episcopacy, including the consecration of bishops. So that Archbishop Lefebvre Archbishop Took consecrated bishops about 10 years before Archbishop Lefebvre did, 1976 all the way to 81, and Archbishop Lefebvre 1988. And then the priests and bishops who came from Archbishop Took would consider that these two sides of the battle, that if Archbishop Lefebvre was the only bishop to consecrate bishops and ordain priests, then there would be at least maybe one whole half of tradition wouldn't exist. You have the two sides of the battle of tradition. Remember that there are the fight against modernism by the groups, by the organization, by the structure, which Archbishop Lefebvre did, following the example of our ancestors. But then Archbishop Took, he ordained a priest who he thought might be good, consecrated bishop he thought might be good, and let them go and figure out what they were going to do. And many of them consecrated men that were unworthy. And this, of course, the Lord Jesus Christ himself did by consecrating Judas Iscariot. And then, of course, all the great heretics of the last 2,000 years have one thing in common, that is, they're Catholic priests and Catholic bishops who left the Catholic Church to form their various heresies. The same is true in modern times. The inventor of the Big Bang was a Catholic priest. Father Joseph, a Belgian French priest. Now I can't think of his name. Belgian French priest who died in 1962, and he is the one who invented the Big Bang. And then of course Martin Luther was a Catholic priest. So there, and the Arius was a Catholic deacon with Catholic priest in the priesthood, and the Arian bishops, tons of Arian bishops, hundreds if not thousands of Arian bishops. And and then the Orthodox schismatic bishops. So, and then bishops of all kinds of every evil have been in the Catholic Church for 2,000 years. And so, but in order to preserve the Catholic faith, episcopacy is needed, and priesthood is needed. This episcopacy is not going to always be carried by the most perfect and most holy of men. And that even those that are doing good work will have imperfections, and even if they don't have great imperfections, they're going to always be assaulted. So Archbishop Took was one such bishop, and he did not have the great sanctity of Archbishop Lefebvre, but he was a holy bishop, and he wanted to do something about Vatican II. He wanted to do something to preserve the Catholic priesthood, and he put it in writing. I consecrated these bishops, I ordained priests to preserve the Catholic faith. That's why I did it. And who did he say that to? It's always the same guy. His name is Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. Whenever you traced Satan in the Catholic Church since 1980, you always end up with Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. He's always there. He is the one who excommunicated Archbishop Took and communicated about him. He's the one, the excommunication of Archbishop Lefebvre in 1988. He's the one that helped form the Fraternity of St. Peter Institute of Christ the King in the adult communities. He's the one that resigned and made Francis the Pope. He is the one behind the writing up of the various encyclicals, most of them, of Pope John Paul II. And so when all kinds of bad things happened, somehow Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger is in the background. But in any case, he's there again in the Archbishop Took situation. So in any case, these two movements continue, and priests are ordained. And one thing to notice, Father Gruner told me, Father Gruner of the Fatima Center, he told me, he says, you remember that Archbishop Lefebvre's movement and tradition benefited the whole Catholic Church, not just the Society of St. Pius X. And he gave me an example. He said, like my sister never liked the SSPX and only stayed in the Novus Ordo and never accepted tradition. But when Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated those four bishops, and then in 1988, and then John Paul II reacted to it by creating the Ecclesia Dei Commission, and then he created a group of organizations called the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, and the general expansion of the adult Latin Mass. All of a sudden, my sister had a place where she could go to Mass because of Archbishop Lefebvre. Because he consecrated those bishops against the will of Rome, because he continued his work and defied modernist Rome, Rome reacted by creating an alternate option. And the alternate option was available for his sister. And then some of them, his sister never really became traditional, but others did, who they began their journey in the indult and realized this is not right. I myself run into many, many cases of people that went to the Latin Mass because it's a beautiful Mass, and they went to the Diocese Mass, the Fraternity of St. Peter Mass, Institute of Christ the King Mass, etc. And they said, well, it's a beautiful Mass, but where does it come from? Why is it better than the new Mass? And as they learn more and more, they discover that it's not just better than the new Mass, but the new Mass is evil. And the old Mass is the only true Mass. And then why is it that they're having a Mass? Why didn't the priest tell them that? The priest didn't tell them that. So through their own study, in prayer, they find their way into tradition. God writes straight where crooked lines. Now there's two different types of movements, the independent movement and the movement of the Archbishop Lefebvre, and there's two different directions of the movement. One is just preserve the faith where you are. And the other is we must spread the faith. And this double battle has been going on since the beginning of the church. Even Archbishop Lefebvre dealt with it in Africa. And when he was a missionary in the 1930s in Africa, the missionaries in the Gabon said, look, the old missionaries, they went out and did pathfinding. They went into the jungle. They built new missions. They spread out the faith. But now it's time to solidify. Now it's time to settle down and build the places we have, populate them with more priests, build more schools, etc., and then maybe later on continue to expand. We have to be like our ancestors. And Archbishop Lefebvre responded in the 1930s and said, if you're going to be like your ancestors, then you must continue to pathfind. For while on the one side, you must build up the places you've started as missions, at the same time, you can never stop establishing new missions. You can never stop the work of the growth. That's very important. And that it's like Bishop Sheen gives the example. He says, imagine that the heart is getting weaker and the heart feels like it needs to be strengthened. So therefore, to protect itself, it tries to tourniquet around all the veins going out of the heart and all the arteries coming back to keep the blood in the heart so that it doesn't go out to the extremities and exhaust itself. Well, if the heart does that, that's going to cause a heart attack and you're going to die. In order for the heart to be strengthened, the blood must go out to the extremities and come back. And just as the heart muscle requires that blood goes out to the extremities and returns in order for the heart to remain strong, that's the way it is in any Catholic parish, in any Catholic endeavor. And Archbishop Lefebvre understood that when he was a missionary in Africa, and he continued that work in the Society of St. Pius X, so that we were simultaneously trying to build up centers and at the same time making sure we're always going out to the missions and remembering the missions are where the centers received their strength. For instance, St. Mary's, Kansas, when it was started in 1978 by Father Bolduc, there was a total of 1 faithful, and he was imported from Wisconsin. 1 faithful, that's it. Now they have about 6,000 faithful, so it grew. And but Father Bolduc recognized that we must build a center, and this is a place where we can have a center. But where are the pieces going to come from? Who are going to build that center? They're going to come from the extremities. He recognized that from the beginning. He was close friends with Archbishop Lefebvre and recognized the missionary principles. Sure enough, the people of St. Mary's, Kansas, they came from everywhere else. And they moved to St. Mary's, Kansas, and it became a strong center. But this center couldn't exist at all if it wasn't first a mission, couldn't become a center unless the missions were developed. Archbishop Lefebvre recognized that and continued that type of work, making sure the missions are always a priority in the work of the Society of St. Pius X. Whereas in the independent groups, they decided to operate differently. Most of them, more than 99%, we're going to establish a parish, which is going to be just enough for our little parish. We're going to develop our parish, and if we ever become strong enough, when we get too many priests, then we'll go ahead and expand to another parish, and then to another parish. But it's very important to put things in perspective that we don't know who's going to respond to grace. We don't know who's going to respond to grace. So when you say that, so from the very beginning, we have to go around everywhere. We have to go around everywhere bringing the faith, like Archbishop Lefebvre did. And then we pull people together. And that's a very important practical thing to do. Archbishop Lefebvre, therefore, was attacked. In 1988, the reason why there was a reaction to him is because he was all over the world. If he wasn't all over the world, they wouldn't care. If he didn't have a global movement, Rome wouldn't care. But because he had a global movement, and therefore there had to be a reaction. Even though it's really a small movement in the very big scheme of things, at the time there were about 300 Society of St. Pius X priests, 250 to 300 priests throughout the entire world, about 250 priests. Already over 200 priests had left the society, and then, so about 40% had already left. 250 priests remain, and that the missions were split up throughout the world. There were groups everywhere, and then there were splits. But in these, like Father Gruner pointed out, notice also, even in these splits, what happens? There are anointings. There are valid marriages. We don't approve of any of the errors or heresies, because the errors that happen, but There's anointings of the sick, and they receive the sacraments and go to heaven. There's marriages, there are valid marriages. There is still a preservation going on, and that so therefore the work must continue. And in history of the SSPX, from when it was established in 1970 until this very day, was a history of one battle, one crisis after another, and very many splits. And that I knew from the very beginning, in establishing the resistance in 2012, that if the servant is not greater than the master, the disciple is not greater than his master. And so Archbishop Lefebvre had about 40% casualties and had many wars and many difficulties and many splits. And so I knew that I'm continuing the work of Archbishop Lefebvre. I am continuing his work into this generation. And if all goes well and I make no mistakes, there should be at least a 50% death rate. There should be at least 50%. That is, all the priests ordained, at least 50% of them should run away. If everything goes perfectly, and if there are struggles, then it should be more than 50%. But remember also, we're in a great war in which we are the soldiers of tradition, or the soldiers in the front line. And in the front line, you're getting shot at, you're getting stabbed, you're getting attacked on every side, and there will be casualties. There will be casualties. There will be physical collapse, mental collapse, spiritual collapse. There will be traps of every kind. We're in the front lines. There's going to be casualties. And so to be able to hold on for a long time is a great blessing. Also, look at the history of the reform of the church. Every century there's been a reform movement. Every century there's been orders to bring back the vibrance of the Catholic faith. In the 20th century, it's the Society of St. Pius X, formed in 1970. It's now 50 years old. And it's interesting, the history of the reforms is that in almost every reform, by about 40 years, it goes, after about 40 years, loses its fervor. After about 40 years, red tape and technicalities, a new generation comes in that doesn't like the earlier generation, and there's a kind of a collapse. And then maybe a little resurgence after another 20-year period. So it's normal to have the collapse we're experiencing in the SSPX in one level. So in any case, so continuing to we go through the battlefield. So now here the movement got to survive, and then 2012 comes along. And in 2012, we have of course, you have the Doctrinal Declaration, and an actual shift of policy for the Society of St. Pius X. And, so you got the 2012. And this is a big year, of course, for us. There you have the Doctrinal Declaration, which wasn't made public until 2013. Then you have the General Chapter of SSPX. And that was in July, you say July 14, 2012, right? And the statement of the General Chapter, the rules of the General Chapter, that we're going to bind ourselves to work with the modernists, and that and that we say that we're going to accept Vatican II in the light of in the light of tradition, and that although we still don't really like it. And since that time, what's happened? And that's where I was hoping to have a bit of a chart. But since that time, we talk about what would happen during this period. The society said we're going to make a deal with Rome. It was supposed to happen in May of 2012, and it didn't happen. And that the society said we're not going to become more liberal. We're going to stay strong. And I remember many priests telling me, just wait till 2018. In 6 years, Bishop Fillet is not going to be the superior anymore. And when Bishop Fillet is not the superior anymore, you're going to have a new superior general, whose name is Father Pagliarani. I'm either 3 weeks older than him or he's 3 weeks older than me. We're basically exactly the same age. He's Italian. And, And he was a priest of Asia. That's where I met him. He was a priest of Asia when I arrived in Asia. And shortly after I arrived, he preached a priest retreat that I was on. And then shortly after that, he was transferred to Italy to be the superior of Italy. I was ordained in 1994. Father Pagliarani, the new superior of the society, was ordained in 1996. So he's 2 years behind me in the priesthood, but we are basically exactly the same age. And an Italian priest. He speaks Italian, French, and Spanish, and in the new superior of the Society of St. Pius X, replacing Bishop Fillet. Now, in 2018, we were told that wait till 2018, because they're going to throw out Bishop Fillet because he's the problem. He's liberal. He's modernist. He's trying to make a deal with Rome. He's changing the society. Be patient. 2018, they're going to throw him out 6 years from now. We'll put a new superior in, and he is going to fix everything. So just wait. And so Father Giselle and I, we told the people, and no, that's not true. That's not going to happen. They said that about Paul VI. I remember when Paul VI died, how happy Father Hannafin was. I remember when the famous case when Paul VI died, that was on the radio that Paul VI died. Father Hannafin was in his trailer down here. And my brother, Father Tim, ran over and said, Father, the Pope died. And he said, thank God. And then he's, sorry, Timmy. Sorry, Timmy. Let's say a prayer for him. And they knelt down. But his immediate reaction was, thank God. And then we heard about the Polish Pope being elected. The Polish are conservative. The Polish are Catholic. The Polish are great fighters against modernism. They fought against they weren't defeated by the communists. They weren't defeated by anybody. And now we got a Polish Pope. He's going to bring back tradition. It didn't happen. It didn't happen at all. In fact, under the reign of John Paul II, Poland basically lost the faith. And there was the greatest exodus from the Catholic Church in the history since its foundation under Pope John Paul II. And modernism grew and waxed strong under John Paul II. But we all hoped so much that it would change out the superior and everything's going to be fine. They said that in 2012. So as time progressed, it didn't work out like that. It didn't change like they thought it was going to do. Meanwhile, what about the Trinity of St. Peter and the Institute of Christ the King? They continue to become more liberal also. So that now, since that time, we see a continual movement towards liberalism. And one of the examples that's come up recently, the acceptance of the vaccine. That it's perfectly moral, and there's no problem with it. Father Rebinger says that it's moral to take the vaccine, but the reason that they say it's moral is wrong. So that it's moral to take the vaccine because of the principle of double effect and a material cooperation. And that if you have a sufficient reason, you can take the vaccine. And if you don't have a sufficient reason, it's sinful to take the vaccine. Whereas the society says that you can just take the vaccine, there's no sin, period. Bishop Sanborn says the same thing, that the vaccine is not immoral. They don't say to Vicantis, Bishop Sanborn, and that it is moral to take the vaccine. It's up to you whether you want to take it or not. Father Rippinger and is the one who holds a slightly stronger position, which is it is normally immoral to take the vaccine, but if you are required to take it, you can take it and it's not immoral. And all of them basically accept the vaccine. And, so that with the aborted fetus in it. And then, of course, they're leaving out another important element morally concerning the vaccine, which is no government, no authority has the right to force you to take any medication, no matter what it is. That's against the divine natural law. You have the right to say, no, I don't want pizza with pepperonis on it. Well, I couldn't say that when I was a kid, by the way, because whenever we had pizza, Dad decided that the good pizza was with pepperonis on it. So all of a sudden, he had this 10-year kick of pepperoni pizza on Sunday to give Mommy a break. I was only at the end of it, and when I was in seminary, so every year, every week, they had pepperoni pizza. And that's the only option, and there is no other option, period. You do not have the freedom of choice. He says it's still true. So basically, Dad thinks there's nothing wrong with the vaccine. Right? You say you can take it, it's got to be pepperoni pizza, that's the end of it. So, but in any case, no one has the right to force you to take a medicine. That's against the divine law. The simple, very simple example of that. This is not complicated theology. Any priest should know this, that baptism is necessary for salvation. If you don't get baptized, you go to hell. Baptism has no negative side effects. However, I can't force you to be baptized. It's a mortal sin for me to force you to be baptized. It's a mortal sin for the government to force you to be baptized. Even though you need baptism. You should accept baptism. If you don't, you're going to be damned. But God gave you a free will by which you can choose to say no to him. And therefore, you cannot be forced to take baptism. You can't be forced to take any medicine. And that's against the divine law. Furthermore, medicine doesn't even necessarily help you. It may help one person, but not another. And then furthermore, if it helps you, it's for 5 minutes. You're going to die anyway. So there's no necessity in taking medication. So it's a very grave evil. And furthermore, the purpose behind the vaccine is very clear. It is to create a one world order of slaves who will be obedient to the government of the Antichrist and who will one day be forced to take the mark of the beast. That's the purpose of it. It's just a stepping stone towards that direction. And even the Protestants and even regular pagans recognize that fact. So you don't have to be a great theologian to understand these things. But it is very basic understanding, but what do we have? Now we have something so simple and basic as the immorality of a vaccine, and yet we find the priests and bishops, the superiors of the conservative movement saying it's okay. And only a few individuals, isolated cases, are saying it's not okay. And so, but the teaching of the Fraternity of St. Peter, the teaching of the Society of St. Pius X, the teaching of every organization that I know of that's an actual organization, every single one of them, so far as I know, is that it's moral. And why are they doing that? What's the real reason? It's to survive. The real reason is to avoid being shut down, to avoid losing tax-exempt status, etc. But the problem is that the government doesn't care. They will shut you down anyway. When the time comes to shut you down, they're not going to check to see if you were a good boy. They're not going to do that. But in any case, it's clear that it changes. So in any case, you have an idea of of how our little movement works here. So here, this is my the Excel spreadsheet here, and this missing there. There's it's 2022. It's the mass schedule. It's not updated yet for June here. I've been running around California and all kinds of things. So there's the Our Lady of Mount Carmel, Kentucky Mass Center. We got a new Mass Center in Lexington, Kentucky, and then Nashville, Manchester, Tennessee. And that's another place in Tennessee called Moynihanville. And then that's Hanceville is Alabama, Coleman, Alabama, Marion, Kentucky, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. And this goes across 112 different places. So, and that's why here it's a little bit smaller. That's why we got this one. Originally I was doing the mass schedule. So I printed out this is a print album a couple years ago. This is the spreadsheet, hence the name spreadsheet. And then, so when you see the red tells you that there's a mass on Sunday. They got a Sunday mass. And the other color tells you that it's a mass during the week. And then I write down the numbers in between, how many weeks since their last mass. So some places, it's 52 weeks. So I don't write down 1 year, always the weeks. 25 weeks, 37 weeks. So you see here, and then some of them, and of course we moved some of them. They've got with masses in a different location, like you see here. And 3 weeks since Mass in Hansville, Alabama, and only 133 weeks since Mass in Coleman, which is about 20 minutes away, right? So the Coleman, the last Mass there was 133 weeks ago. And then Marion, Kentucky is 154 weeks ago. That's way over in eastern Kentucky, right? And then 3 weeks, 19 weeks. Some of them is very difficult to get to. The goal is to try to get to a place once in every 7 weeks. Try to maintain that. And then you can see the number of times we've said Mass in a place. So 465 Sundays here. And then it's not updated. Now it's only 2 or 3 in Lexington. And then 114 in Nashville. But again, it does not have all the places and all the times. Most of them are here, though. I would say 80% to 90%, maybe 90%. And then, so 82 visits to Cincinnati, 60 to Pittsburgh, and so those just counting the Sundays. But many of them are missing. This is not a complete list, but it's I would say about 90%. Then I also have a report of how many places that we've been for the. So I started this, and the beginning is not there, the first few months, because originally I did all this only in my head. But if you see you see the places for Mass, and we also got the other countries. See now, like the 16 visits to Maasine, and again, that's not all of them, but that's 16 separate trips to the Philippines and Maasine, right? That's one of our main places. Then Ormoc, Indong, and again, I don't have all of them recorded there. And then I'll see there's trips to Australia, and then Germany, and then Nigeria is the latest. And they see Nigeria now we have, so Nigeria now it's increased. In Nigeria, I've been to all these places here, Lagos, Boko, Otuko, Vendekia, and Makurdi, and a few other places. I've been to about 6 places over there and did about close to 300 confirmations when I was there last year. And now we have about 3,000 faithful in that area. And we have 3 priests running around and a deacon. So one was Father Francis, who was here. He's taking care of we're now taking care of about 12 places in Nigeria, 12 or 14 places. And so one deacon and 2 priests. I've been 2 priests that are doing most of the work, and then a 3rd priest who's running a separate circuit on the side. And the Father Francis, who was here in the seminary, so you may remember him. We had a Nigerian priest here, Nigerian seminarian here. And so there, and then I'm trying to get back there in the fall. We have 1 deacon in the Philippines in Nigeria due to be ordained a priest. That's Moses. And they've been with us for the last 5 or 7 years. I forget which. I think maybe 5 or 6 years. But in Nigeria. And there the apostolate in Nigeria we have going. And that I was only able to visit there last year. And now, since I visited in August of last year, the Fraternity of St. Peter and the SSPX are trying to build up their game. They both have places there, but they don't have very many faithful, and they don't have very many missions. But since I came, they're trying to kind of expand a little bit. But so far, we have about 3 times the faithful of both of them combined. But we're also developing. And the priests are pretty tired. Father Samuel is the main priest over there. He's like the African edition of me, very similar to myself, just a little bit meaner, and which is needed over there. Very helpful to be a little bit meaner, yeah, So that we have going around saying the Mass, helping some priests come back to tradition. There's a couple priests want to come back to tradition, but they're very afraid. In general, the faithful are a lot more conservative, a lot more than Nigeria, of course, than they are here. Some of our faithful there, they walk 4 hours one way to Mass, sleep on the ground, go to Mass, and then walk back. And they have dinner on Saturday, walk 4 hours, go to Mass Saturday night, sleep, get to Mass Sunday morning, walk back home, and have their next meal. So they go about 16 hours or 18 hours between meals and an 8-hour walk in between. And, and so and they do it each week or whenever. But not all of them can have Mass every Sunday, but we're trying the Mass circuits are similar to ours, just the traveling as far. It takes a lot longer to go short distances. The roads don't have potholes. They have like valleys and mountains and, as an example, when I was there, I saw a semi flip over and crash in a pothole. So that is a serious pothole, right? It flipped over. So what we call potholes here, they don't understand. That's like a smooth road. Yeah. So, and then but in any case, now the challenge of the International is up until 2020, what do you call it? That's okay. Up until 2020, I'm traveling at least 4 times a year to Asia, right? And but since 2020, not so. And you see, I've recorded here 3,612 visits. So that's myself, one of the priests, visiting someone's house to say Mass or the confessions on a visit. 3,612. We haven't been able to make them the calculations of the miles yet, but 3,612 visits. We're supposed to keep a record. Every house supposed to keep a record. The Jesuits called it the relations, a record of where you go, how many Masses, how many confessions, at least how many communions, how many people, and so on. And now, in fact, our latest edition is Salt Lake City. We got Salt Lake City over there. So that's our latest edition. That's our newest chapel. As in, 2 months? 2 months, I think. So Salt Lake City, so we say Mass in, and the Stacy Chapel is everywhere on that map. Right? So that's Nevada, see? So, and then of course, you got Round Mountain, and very beautiful. Yeah. So in any case, there the missions. But the missions are very important for the maintenance of the faith there. Canada has been a problem in the last few years because can't get priests across the border. In the Philippines, they're still meeting every week and saying their prayers, but there's no priest. And they've been faithful the whole 2 years of our absence and persevered. And then there's a few of them that I was getting there at least 4 times a year to the Philippines. I get to India usually twice a year. So some years it's 4 times. But in India, we got Father Valen running around. And then in the Philippines, 4 times a year, but the last 2 years, not at all. Trying to get there. Every time I'm trying to get there, I was trying to go there in May of this year, but it opens and shuts, so see what happens. And then Canada also is supposed to reopen, but that's not happened yet. But nonetheless, the missions, right now, I just did a count of our places that I'm going to right now, on little pins on the board there. And right now, in the United States, I'm visiting 65 places. Now, some of them are, of course, very small. And then they don't get the Mass, all the time. But about 65 places. And then, of course, then now we have the priests, though we've increased. We go to about 50 places, about 40 to 50 visits each week, each month. Before we were doing, let me see if we can get back over here. Show you some of we're working on the stats here, because you can see, see here. Oh. Come on. I hate touchscreen thing there. So here is, you see, 2013, 14, 15. Got an average number of visits per year. And we took the thing and moved it around. So you got, in 2029, got 59 places. 2021, 59 places visited. And then 2021, 59 different places visited that year, 328 visits. 2020, 58. But then the new priest got ordained in 2021. So 2022, there was an increase. I don't have that recorded yet. It's on the information's there. I just got to put it together. And then also is here have the even keeping track of Father Hugo, because as I fall through the cracks, we got Father Hugo's places where he's going to say Mass, and that some places are getting very long gaps between the Masses, and he's not saying Mass in some places. So the places fall through the cracks, I'll try to pick up the pieces. And then, and then they got here the Masses so far here, they have recorded. So 2,000, and so the places visited each month, right? So each visit, so in other words, in January of, in April of 2014, it was myself, Father Giselle, Father Hugo, and then we had Father Voigt. So we visited 39 places in April of 2014, and then 31 places in 2021. But then, of course, now it's all split apart, and then the so that they have the, and now in 2022, you see from 2020, 40 visits in January, 53. 25 to 32. The problem is this year, I'm missing many of the recordings. It's very hard to keep up with all the places. I'm probably missing about 30 visits that we made this year. Some of mine, plus 30 or 40. As each month, I'm getting missing more and more. But I'm still getting probably the majority of them. But back here, I'm getting about 90% recorded. Here, I'm getting about 70% recorded. It's getting more difficult to keep up with. And also I've got to change systems, because as I go through, you see this spreadsheet, when I figure out the Mass schedule, I'm going through this sheet here. Before it was a skinnier sheet, now it's a longer sheet. And so even though you don't have Mass every week, I'm always looking at all the places and going back and forth and figuring out driving schedules, flight schedules, reconnecting schedules, connect to various places. And then, and trying to get to the various places. And you see how and then here, how we move about the Mass schedule. So here, like for instance, and missing some of the information here. So in 2021, I reported that, I went to 159 places that I recorded. And so 159 visits of places where I drove to or flew to in 2021, and then it was 180 in 2020. And also here, the recording is getting more challenging to get every single one of them in. And then, so 154, then Father Poisson, his visits, and then Father Pancras, of course, mainly here. And then there's no Father Cook and Father Crusette. Now Father Cook and Father Crusette. This is old information, it's not updated. And and the total number of visits for our priests, and then also keeping track of Father Hugo, and that because he's going to some places, telling people not to go to our Masses and so on and so forth, but then some of them are not getting the Mass very often, so just to see who's falling through the cracks, and then try to be able to help them, and then so we got the Mass schedules there. And then let's see, I got the year, 2019, 2020, 2021, and then how many places for each year and so on. And then we've got the information for each of the Masses. And now I've got to update systems, and get through the Mass circuits. And then I can see what's recorded right now is 3,612. So, and then you see here in the very beginning, these gray places means that they weren't chapels in that year. They weren't chapels. This is these chapel from the Kansas City from the beginning, but St. Louis came a lot later, right? And then Michigan came later and all that. So what year, when they entered, when we started saying Mass there, in what year? Summer 2012, and some 2013, some 2014, and so on. But and now with more priests trying to develop a system of being able to kind of increase the masses and make the visits. Some places are very difficult to get down to and get in and out of, like Florida. Getting in and getting out is always a challenge. And so they have very inconsistent masses down there. And then, of course, there's some places we just have hard. In many places I go to, I don't get recorded, because but the majority of them are there. And as in the last 2 years, there's been a missing, probably 80% is recorded and 20% is not recorded. But it also gives the historical information as to where we're saying Mass, where we're doing the circuits. And every chapel, every priory is supposed to have a history of their circuits and Masses. We always had a problem doing that in the society. Every few years they'd have a meeting saying, make sure you write down your Mass circuits. And we never did. And then, and then make sure you keep track of what you're doing. And it's just when there's supposed to be someone in that department in every priory. And anyway, this is our way of doing it here. And then now we got to upgrade to, now I got to develop it a little. This system is becoming too difficult this worked for the last 10 years, but now it's getting more challenging, so I'm still keeping track of where things are. Also got a list of all the seminarians, and then of course their grades, etc. And then I keep track of, all the X's, how many I expelled, right? So I think it's 8. I think it's now getting close to 20. But not all the expulsions are negative. That some of them are just not for you. You need to move on. And then some of them are steel toe boot, and so on and so forth. And then so all those records, we have the basic records there in the computer. And then I printed this out every few years. Like this was a couple of years ago. I printed out so that, and then I've got to, because I don't back it up all the time, but every now and then I back it up. So the computer crash hasn't happened yet, but when the computer crashed, the information is still there somewhere, at least updated to an extent. And so in any case, but what's the important thing is that the apostolic side is a very important part of the development of the battle of the tradition. Now, as we continue through from 2012 to the present, we're finding a splitting going on. And that's what I wanted to have more written out, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that with all the obligations of the last couple months. The problem is that I don't have anybody to do some of the computer work for me. And then it's hard to explain exactly the layout. But basically, in the last 8 years, the 10 years, 2012, 2022, what's the theological situation? Is the society more liberal or less liberal than it was in 2012? Is it the same as it was in 2012? Turning to St. Peter, Institute of Christ the King, are they more liberal, less liberal, or are they the same? What direction are they going in since 2012? And what about the dire predictions of 2012 that we made back then about the death of the Catholic faith and Catholic tradition inside the SSPX? And the simple answer is that our predictions were correct, and that more than what we had thought. Like Father Hugo was saying a few years ago, he says, we were worried in 2012 that the enemy was going to come in the back door. So we turned around, aimed at the back door, and he came in the front. Which is exactly what happened. We turned around to watch the back door, so he came in the front. It was like Napoleon when he conquered Malta. He said Malta would have been so difficult to take over if the knights weren't there, because no one would have been able to open the door for us. When Napoleon arrived in Malta in 1800, whatever it was, he couldn't conquer the walled city even then. And he said, we're going to conquer you unless you open the doors and let us in. So they opened the doors and let him in. He said, well, that was easy. He didn't expect them to do it. And so he said, it would have been so hard if they weren't there, because we would have to open the doors ourselves. And so that's what happened in 2012. The society opened the doors. And so that Rome wouldn't have to do it. And the modernism entered from the front door. And the change of the theological position about the evil of the new Mass, the evil of Vatican II, working with the diocese, receiving the approval of the confessions, receiving the approval of the marriages. Like now I'm dealing with multiple marriage cases in the last couple of years where the diocese, where the Society of St. Pius X was canceling marriages or making foolish rules about marriages because they're following the rules of the diocese. And now more and more people are appealing to me to get the marriage done. One of them was just here last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. The SSPX refused to do the marriage because they're following the Novus Ordo rules. So then they appealed to Bishop Pfeiffer. And the usual routine, they appeal to me, and then I check out the case, do the marriage, and then it's hasta something like that. Like the Mexicans. You know about Mexican marriages? You do whatever Padre says, you get married, and then what? They go away. right. Then you never see them again. But if you tell them dance on their heads, decapitate themselves, do 4,000 lacerations, no problem. Then the second they're married, gone, right? And so, but in any case, so there's very many cases now of all kinds of people. But like I tell them each time, you happen to have somebody that knows Bishop Pfeiffer. You got somebody that knows that Bishop Pfeiffer is stupid enough to help you. Because he doesn't care about getting stabbed in the back and being stepped on and spit on, because that's the only life that I know. So, but the fact is that what about those other people who don't know Bishop Pfeiffer, who don't know somebody that knows Bishop Pfeiffer, who don't know how to get married? They have the legitimate reason to get married. There's no impediment to their marriage. They have the right to be married. And the SSPX is saying, no, you can't get married. And they're saying no because they're following the diocesan regulations. And so they're making new rules and regulations for everything. And now they're doing similar things, think for seminary entrance. I'm not sure. I believe they're beginning to do psychological evaluations before you enter the seminary. I remember when I entered the seminary, I sat in front of Bishop Williamson. He was a bishop for about a week, right? A couple weeks. He was a new bishop. Remember, he was taking his ring and going, he's still getting used to his ring, And in '88, he was just a bishop on June the 30th, and I was there a few weeks later, actually a month later. He says, and he says, what do you want? I said, I want to enter the seminary. How old are you? I said, 18. Said, yes, get out. That was it. That was the entirety of my interview, right? And back then, we weren't really into red tape, and I entered the seminary. And of course, I had to show baptismal certificates and all those sort of things. But there wasn't much red tape involved. That was the entirety of the interview. And so, and the fact is that, but now they have many rules, regulations, filling out extra. We had paperwork to fill out as well, but now it's really ridiculous. And they're adding more and more in psychological evaluations. Why? Because they're following modernism more and more and more. And one of the teachings of modernism is philosophy, science is on one side, and theology and Jesus are on the other. And that that the priest is involved with theology and Jesus. But the people also have bodies, and they also have a mind. Therefore, you got to go to the psychologist and the psychiatrist. We have at least 10 SSPX priests, at least 10, and I think more, but at least 10 who are right now under psychiatric care. Functioning priests of the Society of St. Pius X, who visit psychiatrists for psychological help because there aren't any priests to help them, and for psychological evaluation and psychiatric medications. Some of them are superiors. So and the idea is that we've got to, fit along with the modern ideas in the modern world. Bishop Sheen said it very simply. He says, when the Catholic Church threw off stuff, the modern man picked it up. We threw out confessional. So what do? they threw in a couch. The confessional was replaced by a psychiatric couch. You used to talk to a priest about your problems. Now you talk to a psychiatrist. When you had troubles, you went to the church. Now you go to the doctor, the physical doctor and the psychological doctor. Why is this? It's not because doctors became more valuable. It's because priests became more useless. They stopped doing their duty, and they stopped teaching. How come for all these thousands of years you didn't need a psychiatrist, but now everybody does? You didn't need a psychologist, but now everybody does. You didn't need psychotropic and psychiatric medicine, but now everybody does. And this has entered the SSPX. You look at the last 10 years, there's been a change of doctrine. There's been a change of practice, clearly in the direction of modernism. Now we look at 2022. We had to close here. 2022. In 2022, we have Pope Francis consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And Pope Francis is a wicked pope. Now you've got a problem where you can see the behavior of the Society of St. Pius X superiors, who are very much acting like pagan priests. A pagan priest and a Protestant minister, I've talked to several Protestant ministers who told me this actually, that they must cater to the crowd. Because remember, if a Protestant minister does not please his flock, he just got defrocked. A Catholic priest, however, belongs to a diocese. He belongs to a religious order, and he has to please his bishop. He has to please the church. He doesn't have to please the crowd. Therefore, he's more inclined to tell them the truth. Because usually the truth is pretty simple. You're bad. and that you need to become good, and you ain't good. It's pretty simple. You are not believing the truth, and you need to believe the truth. It's been that way for about 6,000 years. People don't want to hear that. So when the people are in charge, all of a sudden the priest can't do that. Pagan priests, priests of false religions, everywhere adapt to the needs and desires of the people. It's been that way since the beginning of time. Only the Catholic Church doesn't do that, and even then, many Catholic priests and bishops do because they're afraid. But this is now the case of the SSPX, and one of the very simple examples of it is the consecration of Russia and the vaccine. Consecration of Russia. There are many friends of Bishop Fillet, many friends of Father Pagliarani, who really like Pope Francis because he's been good to us. He's mean to all the other traditional Catholics, quote unquote, but he's nice to us. So they like him, even though he's a liberal. There are many more that hate him because they say that Pope Benedict is still the Pope and not Pope Francis. And anything Pope Benedict does is invalid. So now Bishop Fillet has a problem. He's got constituency A that supports Pope Francis, constituency B that hates Pope Francis. So what do? You give an ambivalent response. He did a consecration on March 25th, which was not a consecration. He didn't wear any special vestments. He did it in front of the seminarians. And he just simply read a previous consecration modified from Archbishop Lefebvre, where he prayed for the future consecration of Russia. Therefore, he didn't do the consecration. But he did it at the exact same time that Pope Francis did, so that people can say, did Bishop Fillet participate in the consecration? Oh, yes, he did. He participated in the consecration. But others can say, did you do the consecration? No, I did a prayer from Archbishop Lefebvre adapted by Father Pagliarani. Oh, okay. He can make both sides happy. He says that the consecration may be perhaps legit, but then again, it probably isn't. This way, both sides are happy. And this is a hallmark of political priest, pagan priest behavior. Standard pagan priest behavior. And as time progresses, which way is the society going? It's very clearly becoming more modernist every day. I'm dealing with multiple priests. 3 different priests now approaching me who went to the Society of St. Pius X for help, and all of them were thrown out and rejected. One was accepted for a short time because he had a friend within the SSPX that forced him to be accepted for a brief period. Even the wedding I had recently, it was an SSPX priest who secretly sent the wedding couple to me to do the wedding because of the fact that he couldn't do it because of the rules and regulations. But then he can't admit that he can't do it. So it's passed over to me. And that way he avoids getting in trouble. The couple gets married. And so what happens? The priests are using us as an outlet for this or that. And the rules and regulations are making them go against the faith. The things in the Society of St. Pius X mainstream are not better since 2012. They're worse. When the new priests come out of the seminary in the last 10 years, they're coming out more liberal and more modernist. And so they still say the Latin Mass. They're nice guys. But they're getting the new training. For instance, they're trained in the new Code of Canon Law, and that they're accepting the new Code of Canon Law. We learn in our Canon Law class, I'm the teacher of the Canon Law class, we learn in the Canon Law class that the new Code of Canon Law is the practical theology of Vatican II, and it is evil, and it is bad, and it is illegitimate. It is not legitimate law. And it's not a case of just one or two bad canons. Law is to be interpreted according to a spirit and according to principles. And the principles and spirit of the new Code of Canon Law are the principles and spirit of Vatican II. Therefore, it can't be tolerated. The old Code of Canon Law is the correct Code of Canon Law, the 1917 Code, still in force today. But we still have to deal with the new code and recognize that it's out there and that some souls are trying to follow it, some few souls, and we have to be aware of the new canons, what they teach, and what are the traditional ways of dealing with these canons. However, in the new training, in the new seminary, they learn that the 83 Code is the legitimate code in force, and that they are to follow that law and spirit, and that they only reject the clearly heretical canons inside the new Code of Canon Law, such as the canon that says that marriage has its first principle, first purpose, the mutual love of the spouses, and its second purpose, babies. And that's what creates complications in all these modern marriages. In the old days, it's very simple. Can you have a baby? Yep. Can you have a baby? Yep. All right, get married and get out of here. You have a problem? I don't care. Next case. That's it. That's marriage. Whereas nowadays, it's far more complex than that. You have to have capacity to have mutual love. You have to show that capacity to live in community life. And that depends on whatever the judge thinks is community life. You have to show a certain emotional maturity in order to be able to marry. You have to have 6 months of classes before you can marry. In the old days, you had no classes. And then we have said, okay, a minimum of 3 classes, which is a 100% waste of time, but no, we do it anyway. And but nonetheless, now you have to have all these emotional classes. Why? To check the psychological stability. Also, the priest must judge. I don't think, is this person ready to marry that one? Is that one ready to marry this one? Are they compatible? Should I allow them to marry? In the old days, you went to the father. That's a girl, that's a boy, they want to get married, get married. You got a problem, fix it, don't come to me. And so they stay married because they're marrying for babies. But once you add the new Code of Canon Law, marriage becomes exceedingly complicated. And now they're teaching this new complicated way of dealing with marriage in the seminary. And what are the results when you come out of the seminary? You are not in a good psychological place to be having children. You're not in a good psychological, spiritual place to be living together. You need to separate. I'm going to tell you, you have to have a canonical separation. All of a sudden, there are so many reasons to separate, so many reasons to not have children, and the priests are the ones who are promoting these reasons. And they send us training to learn the various reasons of why you can have an excuse to not have babies. These are all learned in the seminary. They have new theological training. The theological training is worse than it was before. Also with regard to doctrine, they're reading modern young priests who read a couple of books and say they believe in Jesus. And they're good priests, and they read some books, but they don't know Thomistic philosophy and theology. They weren't trained by old traditional priests. They were trained by modernists, and they're self-taught in their journey to tradition, and they are now the experts. And now our priests and seminarians are reading books written by these guys in the last 20 years. We had a much better rule before. When you pick up a book, if it says 1961, 1951, you can read it. If it says 1962, burn it. And if it says 72, incinerate it more quickly. If it says 92, touch it with tongs. If it says 2002, then you do, what is that, 2116? Is that what is it? From Monsters. What Monsters Inc. was it? Monsters Inc., right? Is it 4919? No, that's not it. 29, oh my goodness. You do a 29, what's the number? You do a 2919, right? So you put the hole over it and you blow the thing to smithereens, like in Monsters Inc., right? That's what you do when you see a new book. That includes written by these so-called conservatives who are doing this self-help program. St. Thomas knows more about marriage than these guys. And St. Robert Bellamy knows more about it, right? And so the fact is that they're going to follow the new doctors, and this way they are becoming more and more modernist. And we're also noticing, we notice Duke and I very much since 2013 on, this 2014 on, when we meet during St. Peter priest, either an indult priest or an PX priest, you can't tell the difference. Whereas before, you knew the SSPX priest was different. One thing is Catholic is trash. And it looks like this came out of some war somewhere. And then the other guys all have everything perfect and neat and in order, and they all look like they just put it on for some special occasion. And they look like Protestant ministers in the cassock. Whereas you can see the society priest is a warrior coming out of the battlefield, getting ready to go into another one. And you can tell the difference in how they carry themselves, how they walk, and everything. Now they're all looking the same. Exactly as the end of Animal Farm, where the animals can no longer tell the difference between the pigs and the humans. The pigs are supposed to be leaders of rebellion against the humans, but as they kept interacting with the humans, eventually they could no longer tell the difference between which one was a pig, which one was a human. And so that's what's happened in our church. We predicted that in the sermon of May 27, 2012, preached on this whole subject of the changes in society, that eventually the humans and the pigs become identical one to another, and that the rebellion somehow ceases, and Animal Farm stops to be Animal Farm. And that's what's happening now in our society for Christ today. But in any case, we'll close it at that. Also, we'll say a prayer. Then normally we have a little discussion thing, but we'll say a prayer. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.